overheat smash it right now. You don't want to take it down too quickly. Like I said, we still have some work to do towards the end of this thing. This is an intermediate step. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another heat. We're going to go back in there, and we're going to set it down at that 3-inch thick mark. Like I said, I like doing projects like this on the bar where I'm not using tongs. Hey, good to see you. Sorry, friends, I haven't done a demonstration here locally in years, long time. So it's really nice to see familiar faces that I haven't had a chance to catch up with for quite some time. I digress. I like working on the bar though because I don't have to fidget with tongs. Another thing about doing a demonstration where you're not fidgeting with tongs is, I mean, really, ultimately, the proper tongs for this type of work are box jaw tongs, so that the stock can't get flicked out of the tongs. Most people don't have box jaw tongs. You know, almost everybody starts off with just a set of straight jaws. And for this particular type of work, these are not the correct tongs. And I'll tell you why. As you're holding your stock, these hold the stock in this direction. Not cautious, it is very easy to have the material flick out of the tongs and take you out. If you're going to work with flat jaw tongs on this type of material in this thing, you want to grab onto it like this so that it's locked in by the boss of the tongs. Alright? So that way your hammer blows, if they need to throw the thing out, it can't come up at you, and worst thing that happens is if you hit low, it'll throw it down and out of the way. Maybe. But you got to be careful. Especially if you're using a power hammer. It doesn't get fucked in a hurry. So again, box jaw tongs are the way because they capture the stock. And that way, no matter what you do, it's not going to get out of there. But, in cases that you never know who you're demonstrating to or what their resources are. So I try to keep it as fundamental as possible. So for this one, you have two options. I can go over the far side of the amp, or I can come in low on this side of the amp. And I'll tell you why I'm coming in low on this side right now. I filled my notch in, and from there I can come over here. I let it bend backwards. I already made a mistake there. But I let it bend backwards a little bit. When I start on this side of the anvil, the reason I do that is because on this particular one, when I did this, I started across the anvil on the far side. So it left me a good square corner on the back here, right? I don't want that. I don't want that square corner. Because when I split this, I'm going to split across the side here. That square corner is a hump of material that's going to end up having to be driven in. So by starting on the other side of the anvil, it helps to kind of chamfer that back corner a little bit and sets me up for success on the next step. Because it doesn't leave a lump of material that's going to have to be forged in when I split that piece off. So by going from the near side, you'll see that I have a much softer back corner here. Look right here. The material has kind of been, it kind of transitions into where the split's going to be quite a bit better. Now, you heard me say I messed up a little bit. Did you catch that? It's because when I went to the far side of the anvil and started hammering on it, I naturally want to keep it the same width in my head, right? So I flipped it sideways and started forging the material in a little bit. But in this step, what we need to do is to allow the material to grow in width as we forge it. All right? So we do not want to collect it back in. As we're forging this thing down, as we're forging the step in here, we want to allow it to grow in width. All right? Because that width is going to be used down the line here in a little bit to leave a couple of bulbs of metal so that we can make sharp corner bends. Okay? Y'all track along? It'll make sense when we get there. So this is the step that we're working on right now. We've done half-face hammer blows. We'll set it down over the edge of the anvil, and now we're going to draw out this material in the center while allowing it to grow in width, but just going to about 5/16 by about anywhere around 5/16 by 5/16 would be good. A little better, 5/16 by 3/8 would be great. The more the merrier. But we're just going to continue to draw it down until we have it pulled all the way back to about here, and then we'll worry about this shoulder. So this is the stuff we're working on. Anybody want to see it? Go to it. Now for this, obviously, since we want it to push to the sides, use your round face on your hammer. We're trying to get it to the sides, right? And at this particular point, again, it doesn't have to be pretty because of the fact that we're going to be doing quite a bit of secondary work. About straightening before I go back in the fire. It had a little bit of a bow to it. I'm going to use the last little bits of my heat to get it trued back up again before I go back in the fire. It's always, for me, it's always forge, flat, and fire, right? Because if you don't keep it collected, it gets tricky. So here you can see the growth and width I was talking about. So you can see the growth and width I was talking about there. You see that? Here in this area now, I'm kind of fat. That's what we were looking for. And we're about to take it some farther. So now what we're going to do is come back and set down on the 7-inch part. Questions so far?
I got a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How big is the heat zone in your forge there?
Tiny.
Because I'm watching you localize that.
Yes, that's exactly right. My forge is, this particular forge is extremely small. I picked the smallest forge, the worst column. I think I gave myself every disadvantage possible. This is a NC Tool Company's Whisper Baby forge. It's the smallest forge that they make. I ended up with this one. The barrier decided that hammer swinging was hard. And he sold me his entire setup for
handwork.
Like a 30-pack of Coors Light or something, you know, a sleeve of Copenhagen and a high five. But this has turned out to be a pretty decent forge. It doesn't get terrifically hot. It would struggle to get to welding heat.
Small pieces, you only
Correct.
need small pieces.
And that was half of the point of this, is that if you have an ammo can forge or a single fire brick forge, this is still a project that you can accomplish in your house. And in all honesty, really, these are actually way easier in a cold forge because they don't take as much blacksmith Tai Chi to figure out how to bend stuff out of the way so you can still fit it back in the forge. You're going to see when we get to the point where it has when we get to this point, it can be interesting trying to figure out how to get stuff folded out of the way to get it back inside the forge. So, yeah, but either way.
Yeah, that's where we're going.
Not a big forge, not how we're not using huge state-of-the-art equipment here. So, now, we're going to come in now and we're going to set down this shoulder here. Again, we're going to be doing half-inch blow, setting it down over the near side of the anvil. Or if you were using, if you're doing it without the parent bar attached to it, you can also do this over the far side of the anvil. It's entirely up to you. I mean, it's just, you got to get that set down there. That's the whole point. For me, I'll be using the near side. bit of corrective hammering there just to screw it up. It really doesn't have much impact on the final product. So I'm just kind of knocking in on the frog lips and bumps and weird little things that aren't square, while still kind of maintaining width. So now we have our general shape. Now I'm keeping it straight. We got our general shape. We got the width that we need, right? We're going to be drawing this out significantly more still. But the reason we need it that way, just to clarify, so that y'all are tracking why we need that extra width, because you see these little bumps here, here, and here? It might be hard to see from that far away, but you all see those little lumps of metal that are left there? Those are there to provide extra mass, basically, so that when we make a 90-degree bend, we're going to be making a 90-degree, not 90-degree, we're going to be making like a bend here, here, and here. When we make those bends, if we just had left it round and made the bend would have a radius outside corner where the metal's stretched. You know who cares about that? Almost nobody. Except for me. It drives me nuts. So if I can build in a little bit of mass that's already there, when we go to bend those corners, leaving those little lumps does a couple of things. First off, it gives me mass, so that when I bend that corner, I have a lump of metal on the outside that I can forge in, so that the blows that I'm using to refine the shape of the candlestick don't leave it thin there. But also, it helps me to locate where those bends are going to be. So in the aggregate, that helps me to, when it's hot and I'm pulling it out of the fire, it helps me to know where to set it over the horn or find a place to work on it. Okay? Where we're headed now, so we are going to split. We are currently here, where we've drawn the tip out. We've left mass in the middle here. We've drawn out between these two parts. We've let it grow in width, so we have the extra material that we're going to need in later steps. But now what we need to do is to make this spike. So to do that, we have to take the material that we have and rearrange it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a slitting chisel and we're going to slit straight down this bulb here and turn it out 90 degrees. All right? And this is where we get our spike. This is where this will become that hook. Okay? Cool? Right on. So we're going from this to this. And it'll probably take several heats. So this step is going to take a few heats. First heat, we're going to deeply score it with a slitting chisel. We might be able to break all the way through it. It really depends. The light on the angle does make it open. It being bright out here makes it hard to read temperature and material. So I'm probably going to end up marking it very, very deep with the first heat. The second heat, I'll split it off, and I'll probably take a third heat to tip it out, and then we'll get to the next few steps. Try it without a hole first. No, this is all. make life a lot easier. I made this out of a nail yesterday. Because I wasn't sure if I was going to use it. Most of the way through. I think I'm going to take one more heat to clean up at the very base of the cut. A little ragged, but we'll file that out of there. Kind of get the idea here now why I wanted that rounded back. Gives me less to forge in. Anytime you have to do hammer work really close to another corner or detail, it gets to be a pain in the butt when you're by yourself. Right? Because you have to either be laser guided with your squeeze, or risk just barring the heck out of the inside of the corner with your hammer if you're not good, or now, one thing on slitting, this ugly chisel I have, believe it or not, it has two different edges on it. So you'll notice one edge is pointy and sharp here. The other edge I've radiused it off so that I can drive up into a corner, and when I'm cutting that corner, it's not leaving a sharp little notch on the inside of the corner. So that's why you saw me turn the chisel. For those of you who notice I dropped my hammer, I realize how I don't ever use my actual forging hammer for cleaning struck tools. I prefer not to. For this, if you're asking about a heavy hammer, it's the only time I really like a heavy hammer. I have a hammer that's just made to take it's just a piece of junk. It's a drilling hammer. But it has a lot of weight, and it's not going to mar the face of my hammer. Turn it into a standing hammer. Have y'all ever gotten a dent on your forging hammer, and then everything you hit has that dent embossed in it? Nobody's experienced this yet? Just me? Right. Okay, cool. Thank you. I appreciate it. So I was feeling like alone, you know? I was like, I'm the only one. I remember when I was young, I used to use them to strike tools, and I ended up with a bunch of little divots in it, and everything I forged had like a bead texture to it. Because it was an embossing hammer at that point, you know? So I try to preserve my tools by distributing a little. So here we've done an ugly job, but we split that thing off. All right? And it doesn't matter how ragged it is at this point, because we're going to have an opportunity to do this next step. So in this next step, I'm going to clamp it in the vise just below where the cross-section is correct. And we're going to clamp it in the vise. And I'm going to drive down in there with the chisel and then a little fuller to radius the bottom of that, okay? And after it's opened up, I'm going to take a nanosecond with a farrier's rasp, and we're going to do a little hot rasping and take the rag edge off of this so that we don't have to force that in. One thing too, you'll notice that I let the material drift because I need to get in there to work, so I'm not going to kind of pound it back together again, right? I'm going to let it open up. Yes, sir. Great good question. The question was, are these made out of a single piece traditionally, or would they use forge welding and stuff?
So who's that?
These are glorified prison shanks. They would use anything and everything. They would forge weld together nails. They would make them out of drill stem. I've seen classic examples that were forged out of steel cable, like broken mining cable, where they would forge weld the end together and then draw the thimble and the spike and the hook out of the welded end and leave the cable end on the other side. There are no rules. There's a couple of patents, right? But they've long since expired. So there's no rules, really. And I've seen stellar examples to Mr. Power's question where they had forged the spike, split off the hook, and then for the hoop in the back, they would quite literally bend a piece around, scarf it, and do a three-piece forge weld, where they would forge weld the loop on the back of the spike. The book that I just picked up called Miner's Candlesticks grades them by rarity and quality of craftsmanship. And I think it's phenomenal, because you look at it and it's like, quality of craftsmanship, poor. And you look at some of these and it's like a twisted piece of flat bar with a spike for a candle to stick on. And then you look at some of these other examples and there's silver wire inlay engraved with file work and inlaid pieces of mother of pearl and brass. And it's like, oh man, you can tell who the mining executive was, right? Because it was bling, you know, they were like a big cowboy belt buckle. It's, you know, at the time, they were a status symbol for the people that lived underground, the subsurface dwellers, as they named them. Let's get in here, do the dance a little bit. As you all know, smithing is it's a game of like, you got to kind of predict what you're going to do so that you can have all of the parts in place before you get there. And if you forget one part, the chain breaks. You know, so like if I clamp the thing in there and realize I left my cooler all the way over here, that heat's done, right? So you really got to stop and make sure that you got your ducks in a row. Like my hammer. Drive in and give me a little bit of a radius corner on the inside. I tipped that piece of metal out and it started to go away. So I'm going to take a second here to flatten this back out again. Now I'm not terrifically concerned about the fact that this piece got pushed back, because I'm going to have the opportunity to forge that back in here in a second. And I'm really, honestly, this is going to be a courtesy bend. We're going to bend this out of the way. So part of my compulsion, you'll figure this out when you see my shop. I use the tool, I put the tool back where it came from. Right? This is a cutting edge, brand new idea.
Heresy.
I've been teaching welding for 17 years, right? And I cannot get people to understand this. Because most of my students, this is how they do stuff. And then you spend the next 5 months looking for a tool. Right? So, hey, I've worked. Yeah, I mean, you all know this. We have about, sometimes,
You know my buddy here?
to get a job done, you you know, the thinner the part gets, the less time you have to work on it.
Yeah.
So I mean, having those pieces in place within reach, invaluable. But when you're done with them, you don't put them back. You spend most of your time like playing Marco Polo in the shop. You're all chisels.
No, I'll stick
Chisels.
with this
Does
one.
anybody see the chisel? Right. So try to stay ahead of it. So all we're doing here is just taking a second to remove the rat edge that was left from hot cutting, so that we have less to forge in, and less opportunity for a cold shut or other type.
Missing the red beard, huh?
And I use this
It doesn't have the, it doesn't have the
to clean up the tip here, in case there was a little bit of frog or something when I drew that piece out. Because right now, in one of these next steps, I'm going to be turning this end here and this end here into very fine points, right? So if I had a shut, you know, where the metal, when we were drawing it out, closes, then that tip is going to have a weird little split in it, and I prefer to not have that, right? So since I'm here, I've got the rasp, I've everything fired up, might as well take a second and clean that end up. Okay. All right. So now we have our mass isolated, right? We've isolated this little piece of material. We split that thing. This little hickey there is not ideal, but it's a demo, right? Things aren't supposed to go perfect. So, but we're going to get an opportunity, like I said, we're going to get an opportunity to knock that back in. But right now, what we're going to do now, since this is going to be the hardest piece to work on, right? Because I mean, if you stop and think about it, there's no easy way to get to it. There's no easy way to access it. So this is what comes in as, they call it a courtesy bend. You'll do this a lot with power hammers. Because in a power hammer, you have 1 point angle, well, maybe 2 or 3 if you're handy. But you really have one approach angle on a power hammer, straight from the front. You can work off the side of the die a little bit, but you wouldn't be able to turn it to work it from the bottom, right? So you wouldn't be able to access the piece, and manipulating it under the hammer would be very difficult. Very much so the same doing it by hand. But what we're going to do now is we're going to heat this piece, we're going to bend it into a U, right? And by doing that, this little nub of metal that we have here is going to be presented forward on the end of this U bend, right? And that's going to grant us access to it so that we can draw it out, right? Some people call it curse. Now, let me warn you. Demonstrating is not always about showing people how to get everything right. I want to also tell you how to avoid getting something wrong, okay? So when we do this courtesy bend, avoid making it too tight. This is too tight, okay? If you make the courtesy bend too tight, what happens when you bend steel? What happens to the outside edge of the steel? It stretches, correct. And in the act of stretching, when steel stretches, it gets skinny, right? Just like you're stretching an elastic band or pulling on a piece of taffy. So if I overbend this, if I make the radius of this bend too tight, what happens is that the outside edge here will get thin by the act of bending, okay? And then once we go to bend it straight again, you end up with a dip, like a little dip built in where it's got this little thin spot that doesn't upset back into itself. So you'll end up with this little hickey, a little notch there that you won't be able to dress back out with your hammer. So you want to avoid over-tightening your courtesy bend, okay? We're going to look for a good 2-inch radius, maybe, you know? Enough to get it out there and give us control where we can still forge that point and turn and forge both sides, right? So we're getting the metal out of the way, but not this tight, where you're going to end up with that little skinny spot from the stretching of the metal at that bend. Feel free to squeeze in, man. Get in the shape. I'm not joking. one, I burst into flames. Little known fact, I smoke like Chronicles of Riddick, right? Like I could walk from here to the door, I'd have nothing to open. So, courtesy band, take one. Action. Far away from being done, but I left it in there for quite some time and the scale was building up. And that kind of drives me nuts. So, take a second, knock the scale off. So we got our courtesy bed started. I'm still kind of off from one side. But now what we're going to do is take heat and we're going to start pulling this spike out. Here's one thing that's nice about that courtesy bed. It's right back in the fork, right? This is where Blacksmith Tai Chi comes in, where you're like, I've got to pull it this way. That way so I can get it, you know? Y'all ever had to play that game? I actually made a mistake once. I shouldn't tell you the story because it's ultimately humiliating. But it's a good lesson in expanding. I built a billet for my forge. I was like, man, I want to build a big billet. Forge, shoved it into the forge. It like squeaked when it went in because it rubbed on the metal. Got it all warmed up. I'm sitting there waiting. It's ready to forge weld, and I go, boom! Locked in the forge. The thing had expanded enough that it wouldn't fit back out the door that it went into. I'm very, very sad. Very sad. I had to take like a piece of sucker off and bang the door of the forge open more so I could get the stupid thing out. So sometimes when we're going to get into places in this particular project where you really have to think forge opening, access to the heat, right? Because there's going to be times where if you fold something too soon or get halfway through a step, you might not be able to get it back in the forge, right? So it does take a little bit of thought process, a little bit of Blacksmith Tai Chi. Somebody called it that once. That's not my term, Blacksmith Tai Chi. All right, let's drop it. That little piece of metal was a hot mess. It was like trapezoidal, had chunks hanging off the side. So the first couple of heats, what I'm really doing is trying to centralize the mass. I'm trying to drive everything towards the center again, right? And get it back to a reasonable cross section. Like get it back to square instead of rhombus or trapezoid or whatever. So the first couple of blows, you're gonna have to flip this thing like a pancake at IHOP to get around it, to get the correct angle, to get everything pushed back in. When you cut with a slitting chisel, I don't care what kind of chisel you have. I don't care if it's paper thin. It's going to leave a little bit of draft in your cut. And that's going to take a little bit of hammer work to get it pushed back in so that it doesn't go rhombus on you. And really, here with the hand hammer, it happens fast. But with the power hammer, it happens like real fast. You're just like, oh, let's look at, oh no, it was looking good for a second, and then it just next thing you know, man, oh my. Right, and once there's no straight line through a piece of metal for the energy to be absorbed, so anytime you have an overhang where there's not mass underneath a piece of metal, it's going to go that direction. It's not possible. So I mean, the second it starts to topple, it's going to want to go big time. So the biggest trick here is you have to make your corrections as soon as you see the issue. don't just think you can get like 2 or 3 more hammer blows before you try to
Did you guys see
screw it back
this?
up again.
The finished.
Right? We all have stories. We need a support group for blacksmiths. Right? Like get together every Sunday, have a good cry, talk about what's wrong.
Is there ever a project where something doesn't go wrong?
I'm sorry, one more time, sir?
I said, is there ever a project where something doesn't go wrong?
Yes. I read about it once. I wasn't there, but I hear tales, right? All right. Let's finish up this little. Yes. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect at this point, but I usually get it down pretty good, and then at dark heat at this point, I'll go ahead and kind of chamfer the corners, because it's never going to be as easy as it is right now. To get in here and dress these corners. Now we got a spike to a decent length. On some of these, I pushed it real far, made a big old sweeping spike. On some of them, I left it reasonable. The idea here is you just have to have enough to get a good hook on it. No real hard, fast rule, right? It's miner's candlestick. The book that they just published had over, I think I said this already, over 150 varieties. Right, so I mean, it's not like we're doing something new here.
Do you want that sharp? Is it pokey at the end?
Yes. This is going to be this hook here.
Yeah, but isn't that the one you're like poking in your hat?
Correct. This is the, no, this is the one that's going to be bent over sideways to be the hook here on the top.
Yeah, I know.
So now we're going to take another heat. We're going to straighten this out, and we're going to bend that spike out of the way so that we can work on this spike. Okay?
What? What you say? What?
I was in a mine in an undisclosed location somewhere in Mid-America. Actually, there's a ton of mines up here. There's Kingston Mining District. And I was about 5,200 feet in, and there was a collapse, but there was a little teeny stope, or a ore chute that I was able to climb up into, and it went into a huge stope. The stope is just a big open chamber room, right? The room was so darn big that even with the flashlight, I couldn't get to the other side of the room. It's just black, like the room just swallowed the light. And up in the far corner up there, up in the very far corner, we found a shovel, a double jack, and they still had one of these stuck in the wall. It was so rotten, it was, falling apart. Mine was just soaking wet. But, I mean, when you stop and think about it, like, most of us wouldn't even walk through our house by candlelight anymore, right? And these people were crawling a mile underground and doing hard labor with this as their only lifeline. So like I said, these were common from 1865 until 1915. And the only reason that they went away in 1915 was because of the advent of carbide. So you had carbide, and that gave way to carbide lamps. Right? And then the carbide lamps made it to where you had a dependable light source that was significantly brighter. But carbide has control problems too, like little explosion things and stuff like that. But pretty interesting. Secondary footnote. Well, here, let me take a heat, then I'll tell you another footnote. One more thing. Or make sure somebody else has a light.
Right, at least three in the party. Yeah. This story sounds like that, but safety first.
I thought of that earlier. It wouldn't go with it.
Courtesy badge, right? You see how I use the britchel hole? You remember I told you I wasn't too worried about when I pulled it in from the top how it had that bulge on the back? Because I knew that was coming, right? But if I use that britchel hole here when I'm refining these shapes, it'll kind of actually build a radius into both sides around that spike. And it gives me that, basically, it's like a perfect sweat block, you know? So it makes it quite a bit easier to trim this stuff up. And that's one of the things that I did really enjoy when I was learning this process. Because I've never made one of these before. I taught myself how to do this freelance. Because I wanted something that was strictly hand hammered, no power tools, that used a bunch of techniques, right? That wasn't just like doing something. This one has drawing, it has setting down over, it has a lot of half-face hammer blows, it has conservation of math, it has a ritual to it. You have to do things in a certain way to get it all lined out. So I mean, it's a very entertaining puzzle. And in learning this, one of the things that I found kind of fun was that it makes you explore your hand because you need these weird little radii, these small little bits. And later on, you're going to see that I can use the turning cam to get between two pieces here. And if I didn't have that, I would have made a hardy tool that fit in the hardy, you know. But it really makes you explore the contours of your anvil and figure out how to get to stuff. So it's kind of fun in that sense. Interesting fact, I told you I was going to tell you another footnote. Not only did the miner candlestick, not only was it responsible for murdering a bunch of people, I mean, there was regular stabbings with this thing, right? But at the same time, it was responsible for a huge amount of mine fires, little known fact. So, I mean, the majority of mine fires were from somebody hammering this thing in too close or something, or it lied and God knows what. But at the same time, it was also a life support tool. Because that candle, the flame, have you ever heard of the saying like a canary in a coal mine?
Yep.
The whole idea of the birds in the coal mine was that the canaries would die at a higher oxygen concentration than humans. So as oxygen levels were depleted in the mine, the canary would die, and that would give the humans just enough time to be like, oh snap, we got to get out of here. Right, because the canaries required a little bit more oxygen than humans do. But if your candle went out, a lot of the time it was indicative of the fact that you were walking into, if it was, hopefully it was carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide that was building up underground, and hopefully it wasn't methane. Because if it was methane, then you kind of got incinerated and shot out like a cannon, which I guess, you know, it's the same. You get a day off of work.
Methane is too late.
Right? If you get one day off for desert, it's never. Let's draw this thing out. Start off drawing over the anvil or over the horn. We call it anvil. So by starting over the horn, you have a contour, a curved surface underneath your piece of metal. So if you're hitting it with a round face of your hammer and a curved surface underneath, it's going to act like a puller. It's going to stretch the material a lot quicker. You saw it gets really wanky, though. It moves around. So I mean, I'm not really familiar with this anvil. I don't do much work on it. But if your blows are perfect, you can keep it straight and centralized. But what I usually try to do is draw it out over the horn, and then in the last little bits of heat, I come in there and clean it up, right? Now, when I first started smithing, I would focus on the tip first,
I saw that.
right? Make the point first,
Looks like it's 2
and then work your way back to the point. With a thinner material like this, if you work the point first and get it down to a point, it cools off very, very quickly. So if you start back at the taper and work towards that point, the tip still has mass, it still holds heat. So you can get a different amount of work done, right? And then realistically, it's not hard to hit the point hard enough to heat it back up again. Have y'all ever done that? Where when you work towards the end of the bar has a little bit of heat in it. If you give it a couple of really good hits, you can put some heat back into it and get it warm enough to where you can catch the tip back up with the rest of the bar. I see a couple people doing this, so that gives me hope, right?
They're not nodding out.
Not enough? No.
No, they're not nodding out. Nodding off.
Oh yeah, that's the norm. Head bobs, right. Normally I just watch the eyes. The eyes tell the truth, right? I have a student the other day, he picked up, I was sitting there lecturing, we were on hour 3. It was on Wednesdays I lecture for 9 hours. I literally stand there and pontificate for 9 hours. And the student, we were talking about time temperature tables, you know, IT, we're the metallurgy. So everybody's sitting there like fighting for life. And this one student holds up a piece of paper that just says, "Please stop, my brain is full." He held that thing up and I was like, all right, 5-minute break, go flush your mind.
Decoded tanks. Some solvents they use to make gasoline look like water. Very conscious.
But you're breathing.
Well, how about lighting? No sparks. I still got some of those lamps, explosion-proof lamps from nuclear industry.
So they're sealed.
And then I put wooden bases on it.
So they don't try to shut them down.
Don't touch it. Not steel.
Make it strong, full length before it rotates at this time. Just trying to get deeper taper.
Storage. Where a static spark can hold guys off the top of a 4 million gallon tank.
That comes from nowhere. It's magic. In the wrong kind of magic. It's bad stuff.
Electricity is good, but when it's uncontrolled.
Now you notice I'm working at a much darker heat. It's because I've got this thing kind of pretty much refined as far as I'm going to take it. So at this point I'm just tampering the
Spend
edges
time on a farm
and
for
burnishing the surface.
different world.
My grandfather's house is designed. They wired carbide cantilevers. They didn't ever end up using the carbide. They find that out
Ultimately,
because
being absolutely perfectly straight doesn't matter yet because we still have the final cleanups and stuff to do when we get there. So now we've got this drawn out to as far as I'm going to take it. Usually about that far, you know? It doesn't need to be longer. You don't need to make it harder on yourself than it has to be, right? So now we're going to turn this piece forward. So we're going to heat this and courtesy bend it the other way because I need to work in the center section now. We're going to get that out of the way, and then we're going to go through the back door of the forge and take the heat, and we're going to split it off the bar now. And I'm going to show you why it's a little safer once we do this. You remember when we used to forge at the Renaissance Fair? I still have that Ezio. The one that we scabbed it because it broke right here and they
Yeah.
threw it away.
someone else threw it away and
Right.
we
I put
Free-
a little bar
free
in there, welded
volunteers.
it, drilled another hole through it. Yeah, it's now all covered with soot.
Hey, those artist ladies were very frustrated.
Very
Doing
flashy.
a bunch of picture frames out of wood. You make a wrong cut.
Were there any questions as of yet?
Yeah, you can't just,
Is this at least mildly entertaining? If you're going to risk a 3rd-degree sunburn, you know, blistering and melanoma, you got to make it worth it, right?
so for y'all from up north, welcome to Las Cruces.
I get two people to hold here and with somebody else on me with one leg? Let's slide this further forward. We'll move the shade to keep you all in it. It's no use in shading ground.
It's coming our way.
So let's just slide it behind the chairs a little bit, or whatever we can do to just make it more comfortable for you all.
We'll just stay where we are and then work around.
There we go. How's that?
We're anxious.
Perfect.
I'm missing maybe I'll pull off one leg.
I have several questions about this anvil earlier today. This is actually an anvil I ordered for the college quite some time ago. It's not mine. It's just the lightest anvil I had. But my house is 1,000 pounds. I wasn't going to bring that for you.
Oh, come on.
Why not?
Oh, that's what I said too. I was like, come on. Really great. This is a TFS. It's like Texas Farrier Supply. It's called a Future 3. It's a 110-pound anvil. Its claim to fame is the aluminum base and then the rubber cushion between the base and the body. So you probably noticed how quiet it is. It's pretty nice, especially for a demo. Man, some anvils are so loud it hurts. Now, I can't hear it anyway. I can't hear crickets. I have hearing loss in the range of crickets, speech, and the exact frequency of my wife's voice.
It's a fantastic. Right. Yes, dear, the discussion is over.
Right, exactly. The problem is my wife is a sign language interpreter. Right, so I do that, she gives me the international sign, right? Got it. Thanks, dear. All right, we're going to bend that hook the other direction. We're going to sever it from the bar, and then we're going to start drawing out the thimble and isolating these masses into shape.
I've learned 5 different ways to say it. Would you read You were always up against it. Yeah, how unmanly.
I don't know if you noticed, but I went into the friction hole, and I used that opportunity to chamfer both sides back here behind the tine, you know? And in doing that, it also kind of pullers in on the around that little nub there. This Pritchel hole is sharp as heck. You know, I like crisp edges, but there's certain things that I like to have a little bit of a radius on. That would have been one of them. So now we got that pulled out of the way. We got to kind of turn back up again. We're going to come in here. We're going to take the heat all the way back here at the 9-inch mark, and then we're going to use a hot cut and sever this thing off. Now, you'll remember our earlier conversation when I was talking about managing a bar with tongs. Slash tongs do not hold stock, right? Stock can go all over the place. But after you've done this courtesy bend, if you're at this point, now all of a sudden, we have this shape here. So right now on the front half here in this location, right? Check it. Now we can grab right here, and that piece can't go anywhere. So even if you have rudimentary tongs, this gives us that courtesy bend there, gives us something to hang on to. Oh, I almost messed up. Before I do this, before I sever it from the bar, I'm going to draw out this material and make this little nub right here, so that I don't have to go back in the forge point first. Okay? Thanks for catching that, guys. I appreciate it. No problem. All right. Have you ever looked at work you did years ago and been embarrassed? Like deeply embarrassed? Right. I keep those around. I leave them on the rack. Like I have my first pair of tongs in the rack in my shop, And I'm like, I need a good pair of took. When I come across them, I throw up on my mouth a little bit, you know, I'm like embarrassed and ultimately humiliated. But it reminds you how far you come. You know. So I teach welding going out to Community College. I've been there for. I got fortunate in 2007. I was working at Lockheed Martin Missiles and Fire Control. That kind of made me reprioritize my time because I realized I know how to make money. It's never been a problem. If I want money, I go out to the shop, I fire it up, I make whatever I want. I make a knife, whatever. Money's easy. Time. I can't force myself an extra second. Right? I've got a limited amount. Nobody told me how much. Right? So I got to do something. I can recalibrate again. In 2007, I received a brisk recalibration. And decided that teaching was a pretty good avenue. And I've always been absolutely full of BS and been able to talk like endless, right? So it kind of worked out, right? So I went to teaching at college in 2007. I've been there since. I teach welding. And it's supported my ultimately what I do, you know? I should just make assignments and go work for God. Right? Anything but walking, pretty much. I'm good. Alright, so let's, what we're going to do here now, we have, barring the ones that are actively undergoing restoration, every one of them is ready to work. So there's absolutely not plugs on any machine in my shop. It's wired in, ready to rock. Because when I started out blacksmithing, I was living in a trailer in the middle of a field when I really got heavy into it. So, I mean, if I wanted to smith, pick the anvil up, make it out of the kitchen, into the front yard, you know? Go into the bedroom, grab the cords, drag it out of the bedroom, set it up, go get your tools, which were in a bucket on the drill press in the kitchen. Like, I had it that bad, right? Pretty hard. But now, yeah, I get furious if the tool's not plugged in.
I would do that.
Okay, the question was, do I have a minute to kind of talk about the two bases and flipping my hammer? No. Okay.
No worries. We'll cover it next week.
I tend to forge much more like a power hammer blacksmith than a blacksmith, like a hand hammer blacksmith. I don't know if you've noticed that I'm flipping the material around quite a bit. With the power hammer, the metal moves so damn quickly that if you're not rotating it between blows, it tends to get decentralized, it gets spread out. And once there's a 4-to-1 ratio, once your width is 4 times your thickness, it's extremely hard to collect it again. It's going to want to bow instead of upsetting it. So in general, when I work striking the part and then rotating at 90 degrees. If not on every blow, then it's cleaning up. And then heavy forging, I'm going to flip that thing pretty much almost every blow. So that way it's kind of gathering the material up. It's keeping it pushed into the shape I want. she's talking about the two faces. You know, basically, your hammer's hitting one side, the anvil is backing it up, right? So it's being pinched. So those are the two faces, the face of the anvil, the face of the hammer. That's it.
Well, I was talking, you're flipping your hammer also.
Oh, what? Oh, I don't even know. Was I flipping my hammer?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's just trying to look cool.
My brain is reprogrammed. Actually, you're the one that really kind of caught my eye with that once. I remember watching, had a demonstration. I think it was Chris Thompson's shop. And I'm watching the workpiece, and I'm watching it spread and move, and it's like big divots, and he's really making that stuff move, and then all of a sudden it's getting real flat. Something changed, you know? So instead of getting a big dents, it was like flattening out. No change in cadence on the hammer blades at all. So the next time I'm watching, instead of watching the workpiece, I'm watching the hammer, you know? I'm like, I feel like I'm watching Serena Williams play tennis. And I saw the flip. Like, oh man. It's one of the reasons I don't know if you remember me saying I like short hammers. Because you flip them. It makes it a lot easier. You loosen your grip, ride your finger, and you change the faces on your hammer. Just for the swing. Round face, flat face. So you don't have to waste time dropping the hammer, changing your grip, reestablishing stuff. And if you have your, and then you end up with a nice little polished building spots like these.
Those are index marks for your finger.
Yeah, where all the gription, where all of that funk right there, layered on here, you get your kinks. Okay, let's get the 40. We're going to go to our last part, that's that 9-inch part. Hit it. So, you remember when I lit the cameraman on fire? Ran there. I was,
Is that why the cameras are so far back?
we were doing a demonstration. Drop board.
That's a special technique.
I did that last night too after a half a mile. Still works. We were in the land there.
Oh yeah.
And I had a same one I just used. And I was using a hot cut chisel to separate off a wedge for a hammer. I have a wedge for a hammer. I was just trimming it off. And I took one lick too many. And there was a cameraman standing there with his camera strap.
Big nylon camera strap that holds your big expensive camera.
And it went bing, and landed right on that, and it just goes poof, and lit the light on fire. I'm all, hey, excuse me, sir, can I extinguish you, please? That's why now, when I come in,
Don't wear nylon around a fire.
things fly, it's not bad. And you're wearing safety. That felt pretty fun. That felt relative.
I've seen him go farther.
Are you all aware of the fact that there's coffee and tea inside of the building over here? Okay, excellent. Just want to make sure you all knew. It's our generous host. Thanks again to our generous host, Farmer Ranch Heritage Museum.
Thank you kindly.
As most people here probably know, I have to get rid of all my Blacksmith stuff.
I had an answer. Like, there would be no more plastic, there would be no more computers. I've got a job to do.
I have table set up for trade and sales. So definitely, if you have any trade or sale items,
Worse than plastic salt on most floor tiles and doors and have to keep it
Well, what I'm saying is,
Frankly, it is, but
you have to go on the list.
we got a waiting list. Did you grab that one? Okay.
sucking them up. Even just right in.
I'm going to try to pick up the pieces.
You make special scratches, go under the 12 by 12, double tile.
Liberate them from the glue.
And that came up with salt.
This is the smallest forge that NC Tool Company makes.
Made a lot of money.
It's a nice barrier. It sucks. Yeah, Yeah. But I mean, it works. It is functional. It gets metal hard. But it's hard to get past the corner sheets. And then it also, for some reason, this particular burner scales metal. I mean, it's just the atmosphere is not
Wide space. They didn't run it clear out of floor. That's easy. We just right in
or when we did our demos in the Red Fair, I know the Red Fair is supposed to be like the old Blacksmith, but I was like, maybe I'm gonna bring somebody. I don't want to play with the old stove out there, you know?
Yeah.
I do still do a little bit of
Well,
but I reserve it for parts of the so like, when I did a bunch of gantry,
not quite right in.
gantry for bearings, because coal's so hard to come by down here, I have to drive all the way up and visit you when I want to get it. And it's just getting harder and harder to come by. So if I can do it with propane, I do. And then at home I actually have an induction torch. So we can play with that when we get to my place. But for small stuff like this, you kidding me? Induction torch, I'm like, it's like the shop stays nice cold. My beer doesn't. The struggle is real. Yes. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set down my other side right now. So I'm going to measure it. Actually, first let me set this shoulder down here. So I'm going to set down to where the thumber starts. What I just did there is I took the width down, the thickness down just a little bit so that when I set this edge down and straighten everything out, that metal doesn't stretch out and make my belt too far back. Does that make sense? Okay. And then also I set down the shoulder for where the thumber is going to be. But you'll notice that I pinched off a little bulb of metal that I kind of concentrated on this corner because I'm trying to push that metal back in there so I get a kind of a good square transition into that thumber. Because when you set down over a corner of an anvil, you end up with kind of a rolled edge, and that rolled edge you have a hollow edge there. It's not a good sharp edge. So I have all this mass. When I'm hammering on it, I might as well push it back into that corner to try to get myself a sharper corner in the back there. Remember how I was telling you this thing has a bunch of weird little nifty techniques, and you can make it as simple or as extravagant as you want? That's kind of the thing there. You know, that's what you're seeing right now. Like, I don't have to push the metal back into that corner. There's no rules. It's not like the mining police are going to show up and, you know, flash their badge and take me in for inappropriate use of a miner's candlestick or something. You can obsess over the details as much as you want. Jake Kidwell. Jake heard him? You know, I went to a demonstration his many years ago when he was doing vessels. He was raising vessels out of Oklahoma. And he said you were never done with the project. Hopefully you just stop before you mess it up. Right? And that around is so true. Because I can't tell you how many times I've been like, right there, and it's just perfect. And I'm like, I just want to give it one little tick. Oh no! You break it or bend it or crush it. Or with the power hammer. Yeah. Right, so you're never done. Hopefully you just get it to a point where you can accept it sitting on the shelf until you get to work on it next time. Right? Struggle is real, especially when you have those occasions. You're like, I want to polish that corner. You're like, Now, dark heat, you can collect this stuff. Kind of bump it back into itself while it's cooling off. But you just got to correct the bump, collect the metal. Correct the bump, collect the metal. If you watch Mark Asprey's tutorial on this, he just forges it out in like a giant splat, hanging in both directions, and he trims the excess off with the chisel. I have a background in Blacksmith. I don't trim any of it. Like you forge it the shape, you know? I don't care that it's skinny and all. If you keep it where you want it up until the very edge, you can kind of control that material, right? And I understand, I mean, he uses a big honking heavy hammer and just smashes it and turns it into a big giant like cow pies. He'll draw his lines on it, and we're going to do a little bit of this. We're going to trim out the thumber, but he'll clamp it in a vise back up with a piece of angle iron, and then you can make a shear essentially. You can work right along the edge of that line right there and shear off whatever metal you don't want. It's a really remarkably effective way of removing metal, especially sheet, like thin material. So you can just run down the line, tap, 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 slice it right off. Like I said, I'm going to do less talking, more forging, so this started back to me. Down there, probably 1 heat, 2 heats more. Nice thing is when you get to this point, it starts moving quickly. What's our goal? So our goal here is to have 2 1/4 inches from this shoulder out. That's what's needed to form the thumber, right? Or actually the barrel. And then whatever's beyond that is what's actually going to get forged into the thumber. So really, right now, I've got just short of 3 inches, or right at 3 inches. So I mean, I really don't need much more. The only reason I did it more is because I want that to be thinner. So I'm going to take it down a little bit more. Everybody's been praying for. At least it's not like it was yesterday. 70-mile-an-hour winds, blowing sand. Arizona's blows and Texas sucks. We're kind of stuck in the middle. No, too soon. Y'all have been having some wild weather up north, haven't you? Right?
There was some thunder snow like 2 weeks ago.
We've just been getting the regular down here, you know, like 100-mile-an-hour winds, blowing sand. We call it macrodermabrasion, right? You got gravel like this big blowing past. We also call it trampoline migrations.
Well, traditionally you can tell when it's the next one of spring because your neighbors come and start blowing into your yard.
Right, exactly. You hang a logging chain from a pole, and if it's going like this, that's when you know it's a light wind, right? If it's throwing links off, that's when it's good. Okay. You see, I actually overdrew that material. I actually pulled it back. So, I mean, that's where I would have the option of, like, if I wanted to shear it off, grind it off. In this particular application, it really shouldn't get in the way much anything. But I'm going to get it out of the way.
Watching your butt the whole time.
Don't get me in profile, man. Should have learned some dance moves or something.
That's why they're pushing your water supply and stuff in there, aren't they? Got it. Okay, I was listening. Safety questions to the Right.
Soft jaw covers. Now I'm sharpened up back. This is where I have to stop my compulsive loop because I want to make it thinner, but it doesn't really need to be thinner, but I want to make it thinner, but it doesn't need to be thinner, but I want to make it thinner, but it doesn't need to be thinner, but I want to make it thinner. Are you kidding? That was a test. That was a test if you failed. No, I'm gonna. This is where I'm gonna start working on two pieces because that thin piece is gonna cool down so quickly. I'm gonna take 2 or 3 licks on it, but then I'm gonna go back and work on the shank while it still has heat. So I'm starting to do my finish work and my refinement on the thumb on the thimble, and then finish the drawing out on the shank. Y'all ever make jaws for your vices? If you don't, you should. This is a pretty simple one. I just take a piece of angle iron. This, I think it was like 3" by 8" angle. I clamp it in the vise. I make it about 1 inch longer on each end. Clamp it in the vise, heat it up, and fold it over the back of the vise, and fold the sides back, and then just a little weld along the corners. And it makes just a jaw cover. But that way, if something gets abused, it's a disposable or replaceable part, not your 100-year-old vice. You know, I either do it like this, or I make them out of a piece of copper. I'll hammer a piece of 1 inch copper tubing flat, and then split it down the side, clamp it in the vise, and mount it over the side of the vise. Oh, on this? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, this big grip like this. For those of you who couldn't hear, he said scale sticks to scale. So with that coarse surface from the scale on this, when you grab onto stuff, it doesn't slip through the jaws like it does if it's just the tool steel jaws on the vise. So I mean, every one of my devices has angle iron jaw cutters. It also gives you the option of welding tools directly to your vise. I know it sounds bad, but like I'll take a piece of angle iron, clamp it in. Bending forks. You put these in the vise, you can adjust the distance between them to whatever you want. Once you have your distance adjusted, you clamp the thing down and you've got yourself a bending fork of any width. I radius the top of one of them so that if I need to work over the top of it and do something or hammer on it, I've got a good round surface and I've got a good square surface. So it's whatever I need it to do. The vise is very nice. Okay, let's get this thing over.
And I keep them in place, and sometimes they're not where I think they're supposed to be.
Measure out about an inch. Oh, let me go from your side first. Is our lump? That's the beginning of our lump right here. So now I've refined this. I've got this the thickness. I've got this neat little boss right there that I left. And I've got that lump that's starting to be forged. So now what I need to do, this is where it gets tricky. I need two bumps that are 1 inch away from each other. It's hard to forge. You got a couple of choices. You don't have to do it. So you got two lumps that are moving closer, or that are pretty close to each other. You have a lump here and a lump here. Gotta have about an inch between them. Now you see how we're forming those lumps. We're forming it here. But now look, when I go over here, if I try to work this lump too aggressively, I'm going to flatten out the material I need for the second lump. So I mean, what we're seeing is we're at this point here. I've already hammered that in, right? So what I've got to do now is I've got to come over and I'm going to hold it at a pretty steep angle and drive in at a steep angle so I don't disrupt the material that I need for that second lump. Right? Then I'm going to come back, hold it at a steep angle and drive in to define the front edge of that other lump. And then I can come in behind it. But what that's going to do is it's going to leave a hump of material between these 2 points that's going to need to be dealt with. A couple of ways of doing that, dealing with that material. Using the peen on your hammer, you can get in here, but it can be difficult just because of the nature of how we're holding it, where the metal has to be moved out of. So you can get in here, peen that material in. You can use a top tool and have somebody strike for you. It'd be real easy. You can make a tool that would drop into your anvil that would have a space about, you'll notice that the space is about 1 inch. So I mean, it's just a 1 inch post with a little radius on the corners. You can drop it over that and hit it from the top. Remember I was telling you that this thing makes you explore the shapes on your anvil? These stupid turning cams on the back of this anvil fit right between there. So I can come in here, I guess you could do the same thing over the horn, you know, kind of work it from the back over the horn. Try to clean that up. But again, it's that old thing that if you ask 13 blacksmiths about how to do something, you'll get 14 different ways of doing it. Right? And 3 of them will work. Hey, come on. Okay. we got to get rid of the home. This is where a straight beam hammer would be pretty handy for a diagonal. You know what I'm saying when I say straight or diagonal beam? Are y'all familiar with these terms? So this is called a cross beam hammer. This might be Blacksmith 101 for somebody, but it also might be very enlightening for someone else. The reason it's called a cross beam is because the beam goes across the axis of the hammer. So the handle of the hammer is this direction, the beam crosses across it. A straight beam hammer, this surface would be directly up and down, which is great because this is made to spread metal sideways, right? So the metal is held in my hand here, but this is going to spread the metal in two directions. A straight beam would elongate metal because the beam would be this direction. So I'm holding the metal in this hand, and I'm hitting it, the beam would be in this direction. It would stretch metal that way. The unfortunate part is that the body very rarely works at 90-degree angles to itself. So a diagonal beam has become pretty darn popular. And in that one, the diagonal beam is twisted into the 45-degree angle. And for stuff like what we're doing now, it would enable you to spin there. Because I could hold the metal this direction, the diagonal beam, even swinging square with my body, the diagonal beam would be in line with the notch that I was working on. So, you know, the idea there is more body dynamics, you know? Yes, sir.
What if you, because it would be hard to find, and if you had what would you make them out of?
I make all my hammers out of tractor drawbar, or I have 4140. So most of my hammers I forge out of 4140. There's a local machine shop that has 1.5-inch round drops all the time. 5 inches of 1.5-inch round will make a 2.5-pound hammer. And I have a little hammer that'll squish it right back into itself, so that the 200-pound Chambersburg in one heat, you can have it collected and into a hammer blank. Yeah, there are quite a few companies. Whole Iron Works is selling hammer blanks. So they're selling square stock, 1.5-inch or 2-inch square stock hammer blanks. And I think you can even buy them punched with an eye.
The hole.
Right. So then all you'd have to do is heat it up and do whatever you want to do to the back.
Twist it to.
But let me tell you, don't get hung up on the rules. There's no rules, man. There are no rules. Go to the flea market, buy an old crappy sledgehammer, take a piece of sucker rod and weld it on that thing at an angle. And there you got your beam.
Yeah.
And if you wear that one out, then spend the money and buy one. You know, it's there's no rules. You want to try to be safe. You want to try to avoid doing something that's going to chip or break, or you know. But I mean, some of the beams I've seen, and let me tell you the easiest way I've come across it to make a diagonal beam. Go get yourself a big old Husky ball peen hammer. Right. And then that little ball peen side can be very easily forged and reshaped. So you can take that, and even by hand, you can knock that thing back into itself and make a pretty effective clipping hammer or ball peen hammer, cutting tool. I mean, it's just it's metal.
Yeah, good thoughts for sure.
If you want to do a scratch railroad spring, makes good hammers.
If you can find it.
Yeah, every once in a while it grows up from the ground.
So using the beam
But I've
would look like this.
refurbished several ball beams. You can get them in the pawn shop for near nothing.
It's not hitting hard, it's about hitting accuracy. So we got to go into it and then knock it back, and then go into it, and then knock it back. You can also approach it from this angle, come out here and use your beam this direction.
At a Mana convention, I bought two diagonals,
So why do I want to show you something you might not be able to do?
$110
Right?
a piece.
So you
Yeah.
can see there, we knocked that material back. You see it?
Yeah, they're probably pretty good quality though.
Oh, that's high quality.
Then it's trying to stay gathered up and cross over.
It's worth it.
But now what we're going to do is draw off this mass in the center. So we have our thickness roughly established. We've got our thumber roughly straight. But we got this big old blob here in the middle. We're going to hit this thing until we got about 6 or 6.5 inches between points. That's our target measurement. So from that point to this point, 6.5 inches. So at my house, my anvil is 6.5 inches wide. So I just forge it until it hangs over both sides of the anvil. I'm like, right? This anvil is like a little toy. But it's not 6.5. So I'm gonna give myself. This is just they call it. I got this from a guy named Ray Carpenter. It was called. He laser cut them out. They're called Blacksmith micrometers. It's a super handy tool, you know. Kind of fun guy. But it has all the notches for whatever size you're going from. Everything from 1/8 inch all the way up to 1 inch. So it's nice to be able to check the dimension of the stock when you're forging something. It has a little hook rule on the side that's laser engraved out to 8.5 inches. Good handle. It's an honest tool, you know. And the nice thing is it's solid stainless and the laser engraving doesn't burn off of it. So you can torture this thing. It's right there. Why am I telling you this? My brain's probably not making sense. There's a company, and if you haven't discovered this company, it's something you might think about. There's a company called Send Cut Send. Not a commercial for them, but I've just had a lot of people that have had very good luck with them.
Repeat.
Send Cut Send.
Thank you.
And what it is you generate a file, you can take a picture or something, whatever. You send it to them, you tell them what material you want to cut out of, they cut it, vacuum pack it onto a piece of cardboard, and send it back to you. Are they still selling these? Cool. I mean, Ray's a great guy. Blacksmith Depot has these things. We're going to buy them from him. But Send Cut Send, the nice thing is if you have an idea for a gauge or a tool, or you want flower blanks cut out or whatever, and you don't own a plasma cutter, or if you want laser cutting and laser engraving, they're a great resource. And they're relatively reasonably priced too. A lot of people speaking from experience. So I'm going to give myself a 6-inch tip mark here, just so I have a kind of a reference. That way I don't have to, I can measure while the metal's heat, right? And I don't have to spend valuable time while the metal's hot out here trying to like figure out how to get onto it. Something's not good. All right. You'll note that I'm being very careful around that little blob that I worked so hard to isolate. Because this is the point at which it's just really easy. So I've still got about 1 inch to go. Really easy to annihilate the details if you work very, very hard to preserve. Time again? We're actually not too far. Nap time. Right? This is intermission. And see. We're back to it again. I looked over, I thought that was a beer for a second.
If we brought some, we would have brought some for you too.
How do you know that this isn't full of whiskey? You're not my dad.
You wouldn't leave it as unguarded as you do.
Okay, so we are rapidly working our way towards this. I'm going to hand this one around because, you know, this one, the front nub is a little small. I did manage to clip it with a hammer. But what we're doing here is we're going to draw out between points and then I'm going to round the center to give a shape. Now we have options here. I'm just going to round it. But the other option would be to use a bottom puller and set the piece in there and actually, or swatch, excuse me. And set the piece in there and actually make it half round, which would give us a result like this, where we have a flat on the inside with a contoured surface on the outside. It's a nice detail. But at this point, in the interest of saving time, I'm going to do it without it. Yeah. It's like they're sticking in there, don't they? Probably why they call them sticky condoms. So I'm going to hand this around. This is where we're aiming for before our final step, some of our final steps, which is going to be chisel work, bending, and closing the loop. Okay? I was getting pretty close to my finished dimension there, so I went ahead and knocked off the corners. And this next heat, what I'm going to do is finish rounding the center section. And then once that's rounded, we'll quench it. We'll do some chisel work on the end to prep the color. You were asking about the forge, and I'll tell you the cost I have with it. Forges are notorious for eating their own exhaust, especially Venturi-style forges. And this design is absurd because it could have been fixed with a single modification. It would have been turning the burner off to the side. Because right now when I push the back of the forge open and you hear the tone change on the forge, it's because the exhaust is leaving the back of the forge and it's getting intake. The intake of the forge is pulling it right back in. So I mean it's kind of like even the concept is the same as a recuperative forge, except you're not intaking exhaust, you are intaking heat and air. Right. So here, the exhaust going out the back, it's getting sucked in. It's just air to run, not carbon monoxide. It's just not running efficient. Right now, it's going exhaust. So it's the equivalent of putting a paper bag over your face and breathing it down. Right. And because the burner will take it back. And you'll see this, this is a design flaw on a lot of home built forges.
Rotated 90
Right.
degrees.
If it's 90 degrees off to one side, it would have been an entirely different issue. Or an entirely different thing. You know? So, subtleties. But NC Tool Company forges are really, I think this one place. When I bought it, I think the sticker price on it was like $300 or something. Nowadays, nothing's cheap, right?
We have a lot of people going around saying, oh, the propane forges don't need as hot as coal forges. I have one that I built at a
It needs to go back to the front row.
right.
No, the whole front row hasn't seen it either.
My question is,
Probably when it gets
We're the
there,
only
it'll
ones
come
that
back.
saw it over here.
My propane forge gets to 2450 degrees and hold it all day long. And and I can even crank it up more. I can melt stuff. So your propane will get there.
now the thing is, the coal forges localized to be a lot easier. Well, we bought 500 pounds in Troy, Ohio. That's a couple months ago. Really takes a lot of work. On the other hand, anything I've read about forges is
What were the three little nuts for?
Oh,
they're strictly to get you all to ask what the nubs are for. I'm going to count them in this next step. No, I'm kidding. The 3 nubs are to give me mass so that when I bend, I have a lump of metal on the outside of the bend that I can form so that I get a good crisp outside corner. That way I don't end up with like that little that stretch on the outside where it just gives it another level of refinement, you know? So right now we've got lump, lump, lump. It's drawn out to round. I would have taken it out a little further, but y'all don't want to watch it just draw that out, right? So I'm going to leave it a little husky right now. And we're close enough to our 6-inch mark. Yeah, we're at 6 inches. That'll give us a decent, because here's the 6-inch mark, so I got a lump there and a lump here. Close enough. So now what we're going to do is lay out our thumber really quickly. We're going to chisel that out, and then we're going to roll the thumber and start our other bends. Get this rascal flat. Set it down right now. Pull out the old tiny marker. Measure our 2 1/4 inches forward. You can tell it's like, it might still be hot. I hit the ground and my brain was like, no, don't grab it.
Years of training to learn to not grab for things.
Yeah, or the kung fu kick. Ah, where you don't try to catch it, you just like break its fall. So, trimming the thumber. We're going to trim down and across. The depth of this notch is not critical. The biggest thing is it has to be deeper than this because we want this lip to be able to curl underneath this when we roll it up. All right? So as you'll see in this example here, this is what we're aiming for with this piece. We're going to curl it into a candlestick sized tube, but we need that notch that we cut to allow this thumb piece to go over the top of this metal. Y'all tracking? Cool. I'm going to hand this one around because this is on its way. This one has been flattened over the swedge, the bottom swedge. So the one that we're doing right now, I just left it round because we're going to be running out of time if I'm not cautious. So, shearing in a vise like this, don't do it directly on the jaws of your vise. You can, but you're just risking you're playing with fire, which, I mean, that's what we did, right? So, either way, by using a little backer, here I just got a piece of angle iron. I haven't modified it at all. It's just a scrapping chunk of angle. It raises the line of sight up so I can get a good shear plate, and it puts a piece of metal behind it that I don't care about. So if I notch into it, yeah, throw the scrap in, I'm not going to damage my post vise. Post vices, hard to find. Scrap angle iron, risen free. So again, I'm going to come in here, I rest my chisel on the edge of the angle iron to establish my cut, and then I just work in a shear plane into that piece. Now when you do this, that edge is going to be ragged. It's going to be like a beaver chewed its way through there, right? So what we're going to do, and this is yet another reason for the angle, once I shear it, I'm going to knock it flat. edge here, brutal. 10 seconds with the rasp, you can straighten that out, get rid of that. So we're gonna rasp this, and then I'm gonna, see how I already had a natural radius on this corner from just the act of flattening it? I'm gonna come in and do the same thing on the other side. It's gonna lend an air of refinement to the piece. Make it look like we cared for 13 seconds, even if we did.
It only takes 13 seconds to fix It's very refined. That's refined enough.
I want to get on my die profiler. This is one piece that I will pay extra attention to, simply because this is the interface between the operator and the piece. So this is the piece that you're going to be pushing on, handling, thumbing, playing with. So if there's burrs or rasps or rough bits or anything, this is where it'll get you, right? So I take a second, you know, and I understand to rasp that bump off the back. I'm not going to do that. But you can see now I've got my thumber profile there. So I've got this nice little piece of sheet metal that's bent over, ready to go. So now we're ready to start doing our bending. It's a little out of whack this direction, just from me rolling it while I was forging it. See that? How this plane, this plane. So just, but that, no big, doesn't matter. Twist it out there if we have to, or just offends us. Okay, so I think the other work pieces go around so it's rolled up and kind of keep it perfect. Yeah, no, that's good.
No, he just wants to know where it is.
Oh.
No, he doesn't want it
So
back.
what we're going to do now is we're going to come over the anvil and we're going to forge these lips. So we're going to forge these contours.
So you don't have to hold on to everything.
We're going to actually bend this little lip here and then come in and use the outside edge of the anvil to forge this curve in here and start this roll. Okay? And then after that we start getting into having to heat and quench, like move the bits we don't want to move. You don't know that trick, right? Where you have to heat the whole part in a forge, but if I don't want that loop to move, I cool it off so it's solidified. All right, so. For this one, I'm going to use this hammer. I hate gongs. If I can cut those out of the equation, I'm always. Ha! I gotta get my head screwed on straight.
Which side goes where?
remember I had a little extra material on the end. I decided to just leave it there. I could trim that off or file it off or whatever, but what I'm doing now is I'm using that material and bumping back in there and get a good sharp edge here where this is going to roll around, right? So I started the tip, and now I'm going to roll this around. Somewhere right in here, I'm going to hold off for a second, form these two bends, and then I'll finish this up. Y'all sunbaked yet? Medium well? I would be a smoldering pile of bones if I was sitting in the sun right now. I'd be writhing in agony. I'm like a vampire, man. I'm like receding into the shadows, you know? We actually could move this a little more. It's up to you.
We can hold that if you'll keep going.
Okay.
This does not move with that. Well, you got it.
I realize that this is going to get in the way.
Is this supposed to open up like
Yeah,
a
you're
spring
supposed
kind
to
of?
Yeah.
squeeze your hand.
So that you can set the cam over depth you want it.
That's the whole purpose of the little thumb.
Oh, so thinner is better.
You want some spring in there. It's pretty stiff. But that's just a demo. It's a first shot.
Those miners were stronger than
That's
rocks,
a
you know.
true statement.
Miner probably got strong hands.
Yeah.
Nope. So now we got it roughly formed, and it's sitting on the ground. So, I mean, you see how we're working on the plane? We're not letting that dipper go down or up or anything. So now we're going to form these two bends.
And hold it.
Modern stuff.
It's just on the sand.
Every show was invented by somebody.
What do you think? You hide the shade. That's what I'd be doing. I'll talk loud enough you can hear.
Really extend them.
So here's what those little hickeys, those little bumps everybody was asking about are for. We're going to go right over the top of it, knock it down, bring it back. Knock it down, bring it back again. Knock it down, bring it back. Now we're going to start. Over the not so sharp edge. Now we have a nice bend with a little with a point anywhere around there. That's the thing about that. This is the beauty of the miner's candlestick is that realistically there's almost no measurements that matter. It's just whack it with a hammer. You know, take it out of a piece of scrap metal, take it out of a piece of rebar, take it out of a piece of whatever. This is a design of necessity, not out of modern production. You know, so you know, you can see individual styles that blacksmiths had, but realistically, the style was predicated mostly about what materials they had available to them in that particular location or time. So I mean, a lot of these are made out of, like we said, old double jack or old drill bits. They were made out of broken rock picks. They were made out of dull chisels. They were made out of old steel cable. They were made out of anything that they had that had enough mass. Because you'll understand that, like, blacksmithing, we don't deal with dimensions. We now, current blacksmiths, we deal with dimensions. I want 1/4 by 3/4. They didn't do that. They're like, that feels like it's about enough. Because they were looking at it like clay. It didn't matter what shape it was, as long as it wasn't too long and thin. If it's too long and thin, you got to weld it together. If it's just a chunk, you can hammer it into whatever shape you want, you know? But I've literally found artifacts in the Kingston mining district that were forged welded together out of nails, like square head nails. And you can see in areas where they weren't really beaten on it too hard, you could actually see artifact of the nails and the shape of the nails, where they just collected a bunch of stuff, back and welded it all together, made a big old chunk of whatever, and really poorly refined. But I mean, heck, here I am 100 and something years later, finding it. Served its purpose well enough. So here I'm quenching the thumber because I don't want it to move. Here, effect, I'm going to bend this a little bit more because I want that candle to stick out a tiny bit. While I'm here, I'm going to come in and refine these corners. This is where it gets hard, man. Just trying to find a way to get in there and hammer it just a little bit. Over that little sharp edge of the anvil, I pinched it a little bit, but I have enough mass there, I think I'll be able to bump it back. One gross of these, 144 of these candle holders could be yours, and I believe this is for $84. Adjusted for inflation, that would be $22.50. Well, I mean, how much? In the 1800s, when a blacksmith didn't have work, you know, for instance, there wasn't a plowshare constructed, there wasn't a mining pit just drawn out. You were the temple, you know, because these towns were so far from civilization that quite literally you had a town set up at the mine, and it might only service 100 or 200 people. But when the blacksmith didn't have work, their job was to make things like this. So, I mean, they're getting paid by the company. It wasn't bit work at that point, you know, they were the blacksmith or whatever, you know. Lady Franklin or Bullion or whatever, you know, or if they were independent, if your shop is dead, you don't have a horse in their shoe or something, you can make a pile of this. And some of the historical photos I've seen, blacksmiths are sitting out in front of the liveries or in front of the general stores with carts heaped with these. And there's miners looking at them, picking which one they can afford, you know, like a miner's like, I got myself 5 bits, and they're like, no, you're shopping out the back. And then you got the other one that's like, oh, money's no object. Oh, let me open this piece for you. You know, it's like, because these things everyone needed them, regardless. I mean, even if you were the low man on the pole that was in the back, the wettest stove risking your life every day, or if you were the mining engineer wearing the suit and tie going down to the skip car with your highly decorated, engraved, gold inlaid miner's candlesticks. These were the flashlights of the time. Here we're cooling the bit. We don't want smooth. We're going to find a good contour on the anvil. We're going to continue forming our bench in. Until we have established a couple of good flats. Kind of going back and forth a little here and there. where the anvil fits in that radius, and you just have these two beams on the outside. Sometimes you don't. That's a little dangerous. You can see where we're headed though. I personally, just from my picture in my head, I like 90 degrees included. So I like both of these to add up to 90 degrees. Because that just makes it easier in my head to know when I'm there. So I like 45 degrees, 45 degrees. Does that make sense? Because that way I have like a target. Which in smithing for me, I don't know about you all, I have to have a target in my head. I have to know where I want to be so that I can use my hammer to get there. And I think that that's a function of using a power hammer. Because with hand and hammer, you have time to think. With a power hammer, you get there before you even turn the ring on sometimes. So if you don't already have a plan, like I need to get this to 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch square, it's very easy to end up with a toothpick. Because the machine is going to move it. So you gotta have an idea of where you want to land, where you want to be, right? We're almost done here. Just a couple little steps, and I'll eliminate some of the tinker time stuff. Yes, sir.
I'm going to say we have very little information on how long the Blacksmith is. However, Thomas Jefferson was running low on money to complete Monticello. He wrote up a business plan, open and named. So it had all the things about how much the metal was going to cost, what size nail, and how many nails per slave per person. And we still have that document here. The president's on the paper. How long it goes on. Somebody or
Slaves making nails. That was a business.
like the
Right. You're at home on a light.
the other thing is the name of the Blacksmith.
No, they gotta do the nail making at night while everybody's trying to sleep.
Y'all ever wonder why I put my forge up so high? Do you guys have to keep your propane forge way up in the air? Which direction does heat go? What direction do you approach the forge from if you have it down low?
Not that low.
Stick your face right in the dragon's breath. And beyond that, your forge is up high. I can see how hot that metal is from here. If it's down low, you spend your day like this. Trying to peek in there. I keep my forges at head level, especially my propane forges. Because it doesn't hurt, I mean, it puts it in my view. I can approach the forge without having to go down through that dragon's breath. And life in general, it just makes it slightly easier. Next.
Have a nice pointy end. I usually have one student a year get their smartphone on the pointy end.
Be careful where the height is on that.
Punch very into the thumber so it doesn't move when you're tapping on it. Bring it around. Get it aligned. Take it up underneath the wheel. And then from here you can use a pair of tongs. Squish the thing into shape. Yep. Yeah. And refine it tongue. I'm going to need one more heat to get this thing tucked in properly. my loop. 3/4 roughly for candles. So back in the day, the candles were a variety. So the thimble would be significantly thinner than what I just did there because of it's actually supposed to be a spring. So, for instance, the candles. I mean, the one I've been handing around just has a short handle in it. Earlier today, I was explaining that realistically, the candlesticks came in 8 or 10 inches. So the candle would hang down below this point here. And then a lot of the time when they were traveling, you would open the thumber and pull the candle back where the candle was actually burning inside of this as a welt. So it helped to contain the wax, and it would help to keep the candle from burning out. And a lot of early examples have slots cut in them or tooling cut into them. You know, it's a little bit of file work or whatever, so that the candle, when you got to your place where you were working, you could whack it into the wall, spring it open, slide your candle back up, and have a good candle. But for travel, you could flick it and pull it back in. And then the later iterations, they would actually either forge weld or rivet a little piece of spring steel that had a candle snuffer, like a cap, that would slide over the top, so that you could put your candle out, which, I mean, it's too hard to go. Right? Here I am talking about too hard to do something, and these are people that were like moving thousands of pounds of ore out from underground using nothing but muscle. If one of them was here and heard that, they probably, they take great offense to it. And I deserve it. Knock that down a little bit. Come here and try to find a contour like this. Find a contour where I can straighten up the bend and that. And then go back to this. Roughly 90 degrees. Remember, no hard, fast rules. Biggest thing. Make sure your candle is going to clear that plane. See this plane here established between the two bends? We need to make sure our candle is going to be set off to the side enough that it will clear that plane. Because we're about to bend this thing into a hoop and it's going to connect right here. Right? So we got to set that candle off to the side just enough to get that done. I owe you a quarter. I looked at your watch. So, okay. Now we're going to do our kick out here. Remember, we got our nub on this side, so the bend's going to go away from the nub. We're going to do our kick out there, and then we're also going to straighten out this spike and do the detail work over there. I'm also getting ready for the next 3 steps. Can you all tell? I don't like sitting and watching metal warm up and then pulling it out and realizing I didn't do something. Now, you saw me use this as a mandrel to bend around. But I'm also going to use it to form the candle, or to form the loop. So by using a ring as a mandrel and the two posts, I can get this set up where I can put that candle holder in there. It'll lock against one of the posts, and then I can bend around to a point where I can close it up enough that we're good to go. And it'll be a nice consistent bend instead of having to donk around with it on the horn of the anvil for 3.5 months. Not that anybody's ever done that, right? Have you ever realized just the sheer volume of time you've wasted fidgeting? Right, where it's just like, oh no. Take your time, man. I can finish a project in like an hour and 40 minutes, and then spend 6.5 hours tinkering with it.
Stop.
Oh yeah, no, I just do it. So there, I've straightened everything out. I got the hook going the direction I need it to go in. Right? Hopefully, it's narrow enough I can get it back and forth. Honestly, where if you have a torch, this is a great place to use it just to get an isolated heat in the center. We don't have that, so we're going to heat the entire thing and then quench the edge that we're not going to be moving. So we're going to try to get a good heat in here. We're going to dunk all this and quench it. Then it's going to come out. It's going to go in here like this. That. It's going to go in there like that so that then we can bend around that piece of pipe as a mandrel. Okay? Because that gives us a lever. It gives us something to lock it into place, pull it against it. And realistically, we could probably do a lot of that cold. But
You got a hot torch on.
but I brought a four. Yeah, but I brought a four. So why would I want to do that? Here we go. And the question part we don't want to move.
Let's see if you can get it.
So the part we do is bend the hand or the vice here. Get tension on it. There it is. So we're going to bend it around. Now this is way bigger than it needs to be because I didn't draw it out as far as I should have. But that leaves us in a position where a couple of hammer blows to close it up. And if it's out of whack like this, you can tighten it too. Using a bender. Flatten it out a little bit. Close it up a little bit. And we'll take one more heat. And in this heat, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch it in the corner of the vise to close it up, and I'm going to work that circle round. Let me tell you why I do this. I pinch it in the vise because if you don't hold those two faces together, these two faces here, if you don't hold this together, you hit that loop and everything moves. You hit it over here and everything moves again. So when you're trying to form this loop, if we can lock this rascal in, like this,
Hey, Pip,
and
say
we
your
have
address.
plenty of room to get in here and strike around the edges to change the contour, and the contour of the circle is going to change, but it's not going to move these these surfaces. Let's finish this thing. Pretty simple. Yep. Yep.
See that anvil stand, Bob? That anvil stand? Yes, I've got one identical to that. Do you? No. Carry with you.
I'm using a hammer to back it up because if I hit it, the whole thing's going to want to move over. But if I back it up and I hit it, it's going to pinch it and push it where I want it. It's trying to get rid of that bulge in the back. And so now, I will show you that right now.
Skyline? There's a skyline here?
Hey.
Thank you all. I appreciate you all sitting in the sun.
It's warm and cozy out here.
I think that's something.
See how the hook is
Yeah.
stepped out a little bit?
Where's that cat, Bob?
In the motorhome,
Where you
both
live?
of them.
Is that where you live?
Huh?
Is right where you live?
Right.
So I mean, from here, I'd wire brush it, cold chamfer the edges a little bit. But you can see the function of the thumber there to open the candlestick. Got a little happy accident and that extra metal that bent out of the way. Actually looks kind of cool. Good transition. We have a good sharp corner in the bottom here. All of our bend corners have a beautiful radius on the inside and a sharp corner on the outside, which is indicative. You can only achieve that with forging or a combination of forging and welding. Earlier I was talking about, if you do accidentally knock one of those bumps in, it's easy enough to just put a few drops of MIG weld on there and go. Or if you
Cheap.
don't-
Every chance you get cheap.
Correct. Right. I mean, well, and I've seen a lot of the ones of these going on Etsy. They're just 1/4-inch square. And quite literally,
Go ahead
they just
and
take
put it
a
in.
piece of 1/4-inch square and bend the hoop out of it, and then tack weld on a thumber, sheet metal thumber, and tack weld on the hook. And blend it out with a file and call it traditional. So, like I said, this is more of an exercise in learning the contours of your anvil, and there are no limitations. I did this with a hammer, no electricity whatsoever. Hammer, a file, and a simple forge, or a simple forge.
You did at the very beginning of the demo, you showed where all the hook goes and all of that. Half these people miss that. Can you repeat exactly how you use this thing? What is this thing for and why did you make it?
So again, these were prevalent in the mines everywhere from 1865 up until about 1950 when carbide became available. And they transitioned away from this technology into carbide lamps. So, because I spent so much time making them, I will re-review the process. And as I do it, I'm going to set these on the ground, so if anybody wants to take a picture of the progression, you can come by and snap a picture. The first, obviously, when we first started, we measured out 1 inch, 3 inches, 7 inches, and 9 inches, right? So that was our parent stock.
What's the parent stock?
3/4 by quarter.
3/4 by quarter.
Yes, it was 3/4 inch by 1/4 inch. Then, the first step was to come into that 1 inch mark, step it down, and draw it back out again. So that became this spike, the long spike. Then, we come in at the 3 inch mark and pull it between points, between the 3 inch and the 7 inch, letting it grow in width, not collecting the width, so we'd have the mass to make those little bumps that give us that sharp corner. Then we split that bulb of metal that we had here, we split down there, separated that metal off and turned it off to the side. And that was what became this point, the hook on the side, okay? Then we draw out all the materials between points, leaving the 3 bumps in 1 inch spaces. So 1 inch in from the edge, 1 inch from bump to bump, and then the same thing, 1 inch in from the edge. And then drew it out until we had 6 inches between bumps, minimum, okay? Between the 2 bumps there. Flattened out the thimble and laid it out with 2 1/4 of an inch before we made our cut to give us our thumber. And that gives us enough material to wrap around the candlestick. So this was our almost last step. Then we formed our thumber, sharpened our corners up and made those bends, and turned the hook to the correct direction, which set us up to bend the loop. And then bent the loop and closed it up. And this is the one that we just finished. So I'll hand that around. It's scaly as hell because this forge is just scales the heck out of everything. And I could have used quite a bit of refinement around where the hook connects here. I could have filed that a little bit to make it look a little cleaner, but oh, there's the finished product right there on that one. So that you can shut up. Now the hooks, you were asking what is the purpose of the hooks? The candle is held. I'm going to borrow the one with the candle in it here for a second. I'll just throw this down there so you have an idea. The miners would have a candle in this thing, and it could be used in a number of ways. They could hang it from their head when they're going into the mine. They could hang it from the side of an ore car. So when they were pushing the ore car, they could hang the candle by that side hook. The front hook was so that when they were going into darker places in the mine, they could push them into a timber or strike them into a timber, just like you see here, and it would hold the candle for them at a safe enough distance from the wood, hopefully. Or also, later in the evening at the bar, you get this between the 3rd and 4th rib, and with a good little, you could experience all forms of life. And like I said, these were, there are numerous historical records of these being used as weapons. The loop on the bottom and the offset on the candle also made it to where these things could be set on the ground or in a pile of rock and it would hold the candle. So that's why it's an extremely universally accepted design for these things.
It doesn't tip over.
It won't tip over, right? And it always, like I said, every single one you look at has the four basic parts: pointy end to be stuck into wood, a hook to be hung off of stuff, a thimble to hold the candle, and then either a loop or a stick coming out of the back to be struck if you needed to knock it into the wood, to drive it in. So there's the 4 basic functional points of these things. And they made versions where the spike could fold up and the candle could fold down so that you could have a gentleman's candle holder that fit in your pocket, in case you weren't really worried about shanking somebody. But they're just very fun. They're very fun, and again, they're just a wonderful puzzle in hand forging. So again, I really appreciate your time and your attention and sitting in the sun. And
thank you,
I
Pat.
hope we made it worth your while.
Very good. Good show. Really good show.
Once again, I'd like to thank everybody for coming down here. They traveled any distance at all to get here. So thank you very much for coming to the Farm and Ranch Museum. And hopefully you liked it and we can maybe do this again in the future.
Thank you.